In the 5th year of the Wuda reign, when the Tang Dynasty was first established, Li Yuan stayed in the beautiful palace, busy enjoying the hard-earned fruits of his victory. Li Jianqing was busy consolidating his position as crown prince, Li Shimin was busy coveting his elder brother's position, generals were busy fighting, officials were busy governing the country, merchants were busy doing business with merchants, and farmers were busy cultivating wasteland amidst the hustle and bustle. Li Xiu woke up outside Chang'an City holding a tombstone. Looking at the early Tang Dynasty atmosphere in front of him, he sighed. Since everyone else was so busy, he wouldn't bother anymore. It's better to live his own little life with peace of mind. He can eat whenever he wants, sleep whenever he wants, and be lazy. Old Fish Book Friends Group 256566395, interested book friends can add it. Keywords of the novel: Lazy Early Tang without pop-ups, Lazy Early Tang complete collection download, Lazy Early Tang latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. The Illegitimate Son Who Goes Out of His Family. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Some people saw a beautiful woman at first sight after crossing the river, some saw a fairy at first sight after crossing the river, and some even fell into **** luck. After crossing the river, they saw a beautiful fairy at first sight, and Li Xiu also crossed the river. Unfortunately, his first sight saw a half-person tall tombstone, and he even held it in his arms in a very ambiguous posture. If anyone saw him here, they would definitely suspect that he had any friendship with the tombstone beyond species. At dawn, the light was still somewhat dim, surrounded by a bamboo forest rustled by the cold autumn wind. In the middle of the open space was a solitary tomb, while Li Xiu sat in front of the tomb holding the tombstone. Apart from being terrifying, this scene really made people think of no other suitable adjective. However, there was no expression of fear on Li Xiu's face. He stood up and moved his frozen body, straightened his robe, and then bowed to the tombstone in front of him, saying, "Thank you very much for your success. May you both marry each other underground and never suffer the pain of longing again." When Li Xiu had just regained consciousness, he already knew that he had traveled through time, because in addition to his own memories, there was also another person's memory in his mind. This person, also known as Li Xiu, was from the Tang Dynasty over 1,000 years ago, and he was also a famous general in the early Tang Dynasty. He was known as the son of Li Jing, the god of the Tang army. However, Li Xiu was not Li Jing's legitimate son, but a concubine's son, who was not highly valued at home. Originally, Li Xiu was introverted and only liked to read. He could be said to be a complete bookworm, and he was not his legitimate son, making him very inconspicuous in the Li family. However, more than a year ago, Li Xiu did something that shocked the entire Tang Dynasty. One time while traveling, he unexpectedly met a beautiful woman, and the two fell in love at first sight, developing feelings for each other. Originally, the atmosphere of the Tang Dynasty was relatively open, and it was not uncommon for men and women to fall in love. However, the woman Li Xiu liked had a special identity because she was actually a beautiful little nun. If she was from an ordinary family, it would be fine. As long as she was allowed to return to secular life, she could get married. However, Li Jing was a high-ranking general of the court. Even if Li Xiu was not favored, she could not marry a nun, otherwise the face of the Li mansion would be ruined. So when Li Jing learned about Li Xiu and the little nun, he immediately became furious. He not only locked Li Xiu at home and prohibited him from going out, but also arranged a marriage for him as quickly as possible. Finally, he sent someone to the temple where the little nun was located to scold him. As a result, the little nun was already weak and worried about Li Xiu. Under her grievances, she suffered greatly from lovesickness, and after a few months, she unexpectedly passed away. Li Xiu had been imprisoned by his father in the mansion until 3 days after the death of his little nun. He accidentally learned about it and vomited blood on the spot, falling to the ground and falling into a coma. After waking up, he became even more angry and blushed. He, who had never dared to speak loudly at home, actually had a big argument with his father and stormed out of the Li mansion. This incident caught the attention of the entire Tang Dynasty, and the streets and alleys were discussing it for a while. Li Jing, in a fit of anger, also spoke up. Since then, he no longer recognized Li Xiu as his son, and it can be considered that he had severed his father-son relationship with Li Xiu. After Li Xiu left home, he lived in a small estate by the Yellow Canal in the south of the city, and also moved the tomb of the little nun to the side of the estate. This estate was bought by his deceased mother with all her private money as a way out for Li Xiu, because this visionary woman knew that although the struggles in the mansion were not as cruel as those in the royal family, they were also very cruel. Her son was also an honest person who never liked to argue with others, and it was inevitable that he would suffer losses in the future. With such a small estate, even if Li Xiu was struggling, he had a way out. However, she did not expect that after only a few years of her death, Li Xiu would really have to rely on this estate to make a living. Thinking of the experience of the previous Li Xiu couldn't help but sigh. Since moving here, Li Xiu has been guarding his lover's grave every day. He was originally a bookworm, with a bit of a crazy personality, and had a deep affection for the little nun. Now that yin and yang are separated, he has suffered from lovesickness and guilt. As a result, his body has collapsed over the year. In addition, it is late autumn and the night is very cold. Last night, Li Xiu finally died in front of his lover's grave, which is why he is now Li Xiu. In the future, during festivals such as Qingming and Shangyuan, Li will definitely burn more paper money for the two of you. Li Xiu said, bowing to the tombstone again before turning around and leaving. The original Li Xiu had already died, but now he still had to live. After experiencing a life and death, he realized the value of life even more. Therefore, he also cherished this opportunity for rebirth very much. In his past life, Li Xiu was just an ordinary person, a man who ran around for fame and profit. In order to gain the appreciation of his superiors and the opportunity for promotion and salary increase, he set out early and returned late every day. He truly woke up earlier than a chicken and slept later than a dog. He was still very lucky, at least his efforts paid off, and he gradually moved from the bottom of the company to the top, becoming the envy of those around him. Just as Li Xiu was feeling proud, his wife proposed a divorce to him. After nearly 10 years of marriage, Li Xiu was busy with work every day and had no intention of caring about his wife. Even for work, the two of them didn't even have children. Li Xiu's wife was also tired of this kind of life, and her deep affection for Li Xiu had already worn away. That's why she proposed a divorce. Regarding his wife's request for divorce, Li Xiu experienced anger, confusion, but ultimately chose to let go in great pain. After the divorce, he chose to work even crazier in order to anesthetize himself. However, one night while working overtime, he suddenly died in his office. At that time, Li Xiu thought his life was over, but he did not expect to wake up again in the early Tang Dynasty more than 1,000 years ago. It's now the 5th year of Wuda, and the Tang Dynasty has just established its state. At the end of the Sui Dynasty, most of the feudal lords were pacified, and the rest could not become much of a climate. Li Yuan is becoming emperor, Li Shimin is helping his father to settle the situation, Li Jianqing is still serving as his crown prince. The Xuanwu Gate incident will take a few more years, and the famous Chang'an rule will follow. I don't know if Wu Meinyang was born, Li Xiu muttered as he walked. He knows the direction of history better than anyone else, but he doesn't intend to get involved. In his previous life, he was too busy and lived in the eyes of others all his life, feeling tired both mentally and physically. This time, he finally had a chance to be reborn, so he decided to live for himself and do some things he likes to do, such as raising flowers, fishing, lying down when tired, sleeping when tired, and making up for what he owed in his previous life. This is the life he wants. I've decided, I traveled back over 1,000 years to enjoy happiness. Let those who work hard die. Li Xiu said to himself with a relaxed expression on his last face. As he spoke, he walked out of the bamboo forest and saw a large river flowing in front of him. This river was the Huangqiu Canal, which led from the Zhongnan mountain. After a dozen miles downstream, it was the capital of the Tang Dynasty, Chang'an City. Finally, the Huangqiu Canal flowed into one of the most famous scenic spots in Chang'an, the famous Zhujiang Pond. There were many literati and courtesans who liked to put their wine glasses into the water and play a game called Chu Shui Lu Chu. In other words, if Li Xiu urinated in the river, people downstream might drink the river water mixed with his urine while drinking. Walking downstream along the Yellow Canal for several tens of meters, a small river will appear that leads out from the Yellow Canal. On this side of the river is Li Xiu's courtyard, while on the other side is a small village with only 5 households. These 5 households are all tenants of Li Xiu's family, relying on renting dozens of acres of land under Li Xiu's name for a living. This was also Li Xiu's only source of income before his death. The sun had just emerged, and tenant farmers were already working in the fields. A group of ragged children were playing by the river, even though it was already late autumn. Most of these children were only wearing big and tattered single clothes, which were obviously made from adults' clothes. Even many children were walking barefoot on the frosty ground, with their small feet turning black and blue from cold, and their dirty little faces dragging 2 tubes of snot. However, these children didn't care at all and ran with their companions sweating profusely. Even Li Xiu witnessed a child, about 6 or 7 years old, running and nibbling on a black, horny piece in his hand. However, he accidentally fell to the ground, and the horny piece in his hand fell to the ground. A nearby local dog flew up and grabbed it in its mouth. Before it could swallow it, the child pounced on the dog like a hungry wolf. He forcefully took out the horny piece from the dog's mouth and kicked the skinny local dog away, enjoying his prize like a winner. Seeing the scene on the other side, Li Xiu suddenly felt like his heart was blocked by something. The child who was eating steamed buns had a big head and a small body, looking like a refugee from Africa in later generations. Although his hand was only a steamed bun snatched from a dog's mouth, the way he ate it seemed like he was tasting the most delicious food in the world. Even when other children around him looked at the steamed buns in his hand, they even showed a greedy expression. Li Xiu did not expect that the so-called prosperous Tang Dynasty would have such a scene, but it is not surprising to think about it. It is only 5 years since the establishment of the Tang Dynasty, and the chaotic era at the end of the Sui Dynasty has not completely ended. The people in Guangzhou have just settled down, and it is already very difficult to have a full meal to eat. As for the rest, they cannot care much about it. Returning to the residence with a somewhat heavy and complex heart, it was actually a simple small courtyard, consisting of 3 main rooms and left and right wing rooms. The courtyard was surrounded by a half-person high wall. Originally, there were some flowers and plants planted in the courtyard, but unfortunately, it is now late autumn, and all the flowers and plants have withered and withered, leaving only some withered branches and leaves standing tall in the courtyard. Li Xiu rushed into the kitchen as soon as he entered the yard. When he woke up earlier, he only felt very cold all over. Now, after walking for a moment, he felt some warmth on his body, but then he felt hungry and thirsty in his stomach. That's why he rushed into the kitchen to find something to eat. The pot was empty, and the rice jar was also empty. Li Xiu searched the entire kitchen and found that there was nothing to eat except for salt and other seasonings. This made him feel a bit discouraged and puzzled. At least he was also a small landlord, so he shouldn't have lived such a miserable life. How could he not even find a grain of food at home? Chapter 2 Eating. Still not eating. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In addition to his own past life memories, Li Xiu's mind also had memories left by the previous Li Xiu. However, these memories were incomplete and all piled up in a disorderly manner. It was like a database without any directory index, which could only be viewed bit by bit, rather than being able to immediately recall all related things at any point like his own memory. It was precisely because of this that when Li Xiu looked at the empty kitchen, he couldn't figure out why he couldn't even find a grain of food. Finally, he searched through Li Xiu's memories and finally realized that this year's situation was not good. As the harvest approached, a major locust plague swept across the entire Guangzhou area, and the grain harvested by tenants was not even 1/10 of what they had in previous years. They didn't even have enough of this grain to eat on their own, let alone pay rent. In this situation, Li Xiu simply waived this year's rent, which made the tenants grateful to him. However, he did not accept rent, but the government's land tax still fell on him because the land belonged to him. Previously, he collected rent from tenants and paid taxes, and the difference in between was his true income. However, this year, not only did he not have a rent, but he also had to advance the land tax. Li Xiu had no savings at all. After paying the land tax, he was almost penniless and had no money to eat. In fact, before Li Xiu's death, he had not eaten anything for 2 whole days, and he was a person who wanted face. He would rather go hungry than borrow money from others to borrow food. In addition, Li Xiu's health was already very poor, and last night it was particularly cold. It was only in the face of hunger and cold that he died. Having understood all of the above, Li Xiu couldn't help but smile bitterly. The original Li Xiu had died 100 times, but he still had to live. Now that there was not a single grain of food in his family, Li Xiu had just arrived in the Tang Dynasty and no one knew him. It was almost winter again, which was a rhythm that would force him to death. Could it be that he also had to die in this winter, like the original Li Xiu, due to hunger and cold? As a traveler, if you really starve yourself to death, that would be a huge joke. Li Xiu muttered to himself at this moment, but then gave a bitter smile and said, "But the traveler also needs to eat. The most important thing now is to find something to eat, and only when you are full will you have the strength to think of a way." After finishing speaking, Li Xiu tirelessly searched through all the rooms in the house. Although he couldn't find any food or money, he found one thing. A simple fishing rod. There was also a small box next to the fishing rod, which contained fishing lines, hooks, and other items. Do it yourself, have plenty of food and clothing, it seems that this meal is destined to have fish. Li Xiu said and picked up the fishing rod to try it out. He found it to be very sturdy and definitely usable. In his past life, Li Xiu had a fondness for fishing, but he was usually too busy and didn't have time to go. However, he still had some research on fishing. He tied the fishing line and counted the hooks in the box, making a total of only 7. Therefore, Li Xiu decided to make these 7 hooks into a combination hook, commonly known as a bomb hook. This was a combination hook that emerged in later generations with the rise of sea fishing. Because there were many hooks with strong catching ability, it was known as a bomb hook. However, after the bomb hook was made, Li Xiu suddenly realized that he had made a mistake. Bomb hooks usually use junk food as bait. The so-called junk food is actually fish bait formed by micro-fermentation of bean cakes, sesame cakes, bran, and other ingredients. When using it, he threw the bait and hook into the water, but where is he going to find junk food now? Forget it, let's dig some earthworms. A few more hooks are better than one hook, Li Xiu muttered helplessly again. In the past, fishing was for fun, but now fishing is to fill one's stomach, so there's not much emphasis on it. There was a vegetable field in the yard, but of course there were no more vegetables left. Li Xiu dug with a shovel twice and found many earthworms. He stuffed them into a box and drank a lot of water. When he was full, he carried a fishing rod out of the door. The small river in front of the door was too shallow, and there were children playing on the other bank, which was not a good place to fish. Therefore, Li Xiu finally came to the Yellow Canal to prepare to take a fishing rod. Fishing is an activity that combines skill and luck. If Li Xiu wants to catch a fish, the first thing he needs to do is to choose a good fishing spot. There are many things to consider, such as season, weather, water conditions, and so on. Li Xiu understands some things and searched along the riverbank. Finally, he found a good fishing spot under a dead willow tree by the river. This is the best fishing spot nearby. However, unfortunately, a middle-aged man has already sat there and started fishing. I saw this middle-aged man wearing ordinary clothes, but with thick eyebrows and wide mouth, he looked very majestic. He held a smooth and straight fishing rod in his hand, with gold inlaid handshake points. He sat on a comfortable bamboo couch under him, and next to the couch was a black painted golden food box. Even through the box, Li Xiu could smell the aroma of the food inside, which made him drool. It was difficult for him to move his eyes away from the food box. It's really frustrating that people are more popular than people. Li Xiu looked at the extremely simple fishing rod in his hand, and then at the other party's gold-plated fishing rod. If he sold the other party's fishing rod, it would probably be enough for him to eat for a year. This made him feel a bit unbalanced, and he didn't want to find a fishing spot anymore. He sat directly on the left side of the other party, 1 foot away. Besides, he hasn't eaten for 2 days. He's been tired and dizzy from walking this way just now, and he really doesn't have the energy to walk anymore. Li Xiu didn't rush to lower the pole. Instead, he pulled out some wild grass on the ground that hadn't completely withered, as well as the reeds by the river. He picked up a stone and smashed it into pieces. Finally, he kneaded it into a ball and threw it into the water. This was called nesting. Originally, using fish bait had the best effect, but unfortunately Li Xiu didn't. He could only use wild grass to make a nest, which was better than nothing. "Kid, why are you throwing grass into the river if you're not fishing properly?" At this moment, the middle-aged man sitting under the willow tree suddenly turned his head and asked. It was only then that Li Xiu noticed that although the other person was sitting there, his figure was also very tall, especially when he was holding a fishing rod. It made people feel like he was holding a sword in his hand. He looked fierce and didn't look like an ordinary person. "Uncle, I'm sorry, the boy is using grass to make a nest. If you disturb me, please forgive me." Li Xiu politely replied, "After all, the two of them are so close that the noise of making a nest can easily startle the fish. Moreover, looking at the other person's murderous appearance, he may be a member of the Tang Dynasty's mafia. Li Xiu is not willing to provoke such people." The powerful middle-aged man was very curious when he heard this new term, as if he wanted to ask but didn't feel embarrassed to speak. Li Xiu didn't explain much. After all, everyone was not familiar, and he really didn't have the strength to speak much. At present, Li Xiu put the earthworm on the fishing hook, and the middle-aged man next to him was stunned again because he saw someone hanging so many hooks on a fishing line for the first time. However, he quickly showed a disdainful expression. Speaking of which, he had also caught fish for many years. Although his skills were not very good, he was also very knowledgeable. The fishing method of the young man in front of him had never been heard of before, and it was probably just a clever guy who thought that with more hooks, he could fish more. How could there be such a simple thing in this world? Thinking of this, the middle-aged man was too lazy to look at Li Xiu anymore and immediately focused on fishing. Gulyalu, but what the middle-aged man didn't expect was that as soon as he turned his head, he heard a strange sound coming from beside him. He then turned his head around and looked for it, only to find that the sound was coming from Li Xiu's side. At this moment, Li Xiu stared straight at his fish float, but his flushed face betrayed him. What made the sound was actually his empty stomach. He had just taken a few sips of cold water to satisfy his hunger, but now he was even more hungry, with a rebellious sound in his stomach. He also found that his stomach had a natural talent for music, and it sounded like a drum with a rhythmic rhythm, making people want to jump up and dance to the beat. Fishing was originally a quiet activity, and Li Xiu's stomach kept drumming. The middle-aged man next to him became more and more irritable as he listened. His originally good mood was ruined by him, but in the end, he couldn't bear to listen anymore. He simply took out a roasted chicken from the food box next to him and threw it onto the grass next to Li Xiu, saying, eat it, and be quiet for a while. Don't disturb me fishing anymore. When you are starving, suddenly a roasted chicken falls in front of you, which is probably the happiest feeling in the world. However, when this roasted chicken is thrown over by someone casually and the other person even looks at a beggar-like expression of charity, it is probably unbearable. Dignity in life, although life may seem more precious, many people would rather choose the former. Therefore, Li Xiu responded with a stern and righteous expression, a gentleman does not eat. As he spoke, his eyes accidentally scanned the greasy roasted chicken, causing a stream of saliva to gush out of his mouth. When he swallowed it, he made a loud noise, and his speech immediately became very lacking in confidence. He continued, do not eat the food that comes with you. Oh, I didn't see that you were still a strong-willed scholar, but if you don't swallow your saliva when you speak, you'll appear even more powerful. The middle-aged man couldn't help but joke when he saw Li Xiu, who was starving, but also put on a righteous and resolute look. Li Xiu tried hard to control his head from turning to look at the middle-aged man, so as not to feel embarrassed, and even more so, he was afraid of losing control of his saliva when he saw the roasted chicken again. However, the middle-aged man became interested in him at this moment. When he saw Li Xiu ignoring him, he threw down the fishing rod and walked to Li Xiu's side. He then bent down to pick up the roasted chicken on the ground and handed it over, saying, kid, it was me who was wrong earlier. How about I treat you to eat now? Don't eat, it's already dirty. Li Xiu decided to have the courage to the end, but most importantly, the ground was really dirty. Seeing that Li Xiu was actually disgusted with dirt, the middle-aged man's face turned black. He was a martial artist and didn't usually have that much bad smell. Not to mention the roasted chicken that fell on the ground, sometimes he was extremely hungry during battles. Even if it fell into the bloodshed, he could still eat it. Moreover, he was stubborn. The more Li Xiu didn't eat it, the more he wanted him to eat it. So he made a move that he thought was very smart, but it made Li Xiu stare at him. He opened his big mouth a few times and ate all the dirty parts of the roasted chicken, then handed it over again and said, here, it's not dirty anymore. Looking at the devastated roast chicken in front of him, Li Xiu felt like crying without tears. The dirty place was really gone, but it was full of the saliva of the middle-aged man, which was not as good as before. Although he didn't have any cleanliness, he couldn't eat the saliva of others. What if the other party had hepatitis B? But if he refuses again, he is worried that the other party may turn their back. Eating. Still not eating. This is really a difficult decision. Chapter 3. Tenants who send grain. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Li Xiu looked at the drool-filled roasted chicken in front of him with a worried expression. He didn't have the courage to bite it, which made the middle-aged man impatiently say, so what's wrong? I've already eaten all the dirty parts. Is there any problem? There is. Saliva. Li Xiu considered himself an honest and good child, so he decided to tell the truth. As expected, the middle-aged man's face turned even darker upon hearing this, and he was vaguely on the verge of exploding. This made Li Xiu somewhat worried and his eyes wandered around, looking for a brick or other self-defense measure. However, to his surprise, although the middle-aged man looked like a lawless person, he had good manners. At least he didn't hit him, but suddenly opened his big mouth and swallowed the whole roasted chicken with a click sound, even chewing the bones. Then he roared angrily, I've heard you're a bookworm for a long time, but I didn't expect there to be so many bad habits. Back then, when Ma and your father were eating in the same pot on the battlefield, I didn't see him disdain Ma's saliva. After the middle-aged man finished yelling, he angrily returned to his seat and continued fishing. It was probably the first time in his life that he had been so despised. Li Xiu was shocked when he heard the other person's words, as they spoke in a tone of scolding from elders and juniors. From the other person's words, he could also tell that he recognized Li Xiu's identity and was also a comrade in arms with Li Jing. However, after thinking for a while, Li Xiu came up with many surnames Qin, Cheng, or Li, but none of them were surnamed Ma. After receiving a scolding in vain, Li Xiu couldn't retaliate. If it were for normal times, he probably wouldn't have the face to stay here anymore. But now his stomach is tight, so he can only shamelessly stare at the fish float, praying in his heart that some fish will take the bait soon, so he can leave here earlier. However, it may be Li Xiu's bad luck, or it may be because the bait is too simple. He sat there for a while without waiting for the fish to take the bait. The middle-aged man next to him looked at Li Xiu, who was still sitting steadily on the fishing platform, with a disappointed expression on his face. In fact, at the beginning, he had already recognized Li Xiu's identity. Although he and Li Jing were only casual friends, they could not watch each other's son go hungry. Although Li Jing said he did not recognize this son, blood is thicker than water. It was precisely because of this that he deliberately threw a roasted chicken over to test Li Xiu. At first, Li Xiu's backbone made him feel good, worthy of being Li Jing's son. However, Li Xiu's performance left him very disappointed. A big man actually behaved like a woman, without any man's boldness. This was not like a general who probably read too much, so he read foolishly. In addition, he also thought that Li Xiu had hung so many fishing hooks on his fishing line, which seemed childish and ridiculous. It is estimated that only he, a bookworm, would come up with such a solution. However, just as the middle-aged man thought of this, he suddenly saw Li Xiu suddenly lift the rod next to him, and the fishing line suddenly snapped straight. Then, a fat grass carp was lifted out of the water, appearing to weigh 7 or 8 pounds. This made Li Xiu extremely excited, and finally he could have a full meal. At present, Li Xiu picked up the lively grass carp and put it in a bamboo basket. He put away the fishing rod and prepared to go home to cook. However, before leaving, he politely bowed to the middle-aged man without saying anything more, then turned around and left. I didn't expect this kid to have some ***** luck, so he could catch fish like this. The middle-aged man couldn't help but touch his chin with a surprised expression as he watched Li Xiu leave. However, this only surprised him a little, and he didn't take Li Xiu to heart because of it. Li Xiu excitedly returned home carrying a fish. However, as he was about to get home, he suddenly saw someone standing in front of the house waiting. As he approached, he realized that the other person was a middle-aged man in his 40s and 50s, dressed in patched coarse cloth shorts. His dark face was full of wrinkles, and his hands and feet were particularly thick. He looked like an honest farmer. When Li Xiu saw the appearance of the person in front of the door clearly, he searched through the memories of the previous Li Xiu and quickly found information about the person. The other person's surname was Lu, and there was no official name. Due to their age at home, they were called Lu De when they were young, and Lu Lao De when they were older. They were one of Li Xiu's only 5 tenants, living in a small village across the river. The village's name was also named after Li Xiu's surname, and they were called Li family Zhuangzi. "Uncle Lu, why are you here?" Li Xiu said politely when he saw Lu Laoda. In Li Xiu's memory, Lu Laoda seemed to have some twisted relatives with Li Xiu's deceased mother. He was also honest and upright, and used to help Li Xiu take care of the Li family village. Therefore, Li Xiu also had great respect for Lu Laoda. "Master, this year there has been a locust plague, and you kindly spared the big guy's rent, even bearing the land tax on your own. We are grateful for the kindness of the master, but you also need to eat, so each of our tenants has provided some food and ground 2 bags of white flour to send to you. After all, you also have to endure this winter." Lu respectfully bowed to Li Xiu and patted the bag on the car beside him. Grain. Li Xiu couldn't help but get excited when he heard that Mr. Lu was actually delivering grain to him. He wished he could accept it immediately. However, he soon thought of the child who had been fighting with the dog before, and looked at Mr. Lu, who was covered in patches in front of him. This made him feel like something was blocking his heart for a while. It took him a long time before he spoke up. Uncle Lu, is your grain enough to eat this winter? Mr. Lu was momentarily taken aback when he heard Li Xiu's question, and then a simple smile appeared on his face as he said, how could it be? We don't have enough food to eat every winter, let alone a disaster this year. But we have hands and feet, so we go out to find some work in winter. Not only do we manage food, but sometimes we also have wages. After enduring it, we'll pass. Lu Laoda said it was easy, but Li Xiu listened with a heavy heart. How could there be so much work to do in winter? At the same time, this also moved him very much. Mr. Lu has both old and young in his family, and although there is not enough food to eat, he can still think of bringing himself some. Although 2 bags of flour may not seem much, saving 1 province can also help him survive a winter. If he can't think of a way to make money, these 2 bags of flour may be his lifeline. Master, let me help you deliver the flour to the kitchen. Seeing Li Xiu silent, Lu Laoda smiled again with a simple and honest smile. He knew that Li Xiu was a scholar with a thin face, afraid that he wouldn't accept it, so he took the initiative to speak. Li Xiu is not someone who insists on saving face, and he really needs food to save his life, so he didn't act any more affectedly. He immediately thanked him and opened the door to ask Lu Laoda to push the unicycle forward. Then Lu Laoda helped Li Xiu carry the flour to the kitchen and put it into the noodle jar. There was a lid on the noodle jar, and when not in use, he pressed it down with a stone to prevent mice from stealing it. After carrying the flour, Mr. Lu took out a piece of tofu from the unicycle and placed it on the kitchen chopping board, laughing, Master, when you came back, you passed by the market. I knew you liked to eat vegetables, but now the vegetables have risen to 10 won per kilogram, which can be exchanged for half a bushel of grain. Moreover, there is no market for it, so I can only buy you a piece of tofu to eat. Uncle Lu has a heart. A warm current surged in Li Xiu's heart again, but then he asked curiously, Uncle Lu, is the price of vegetables very expensive now? Of course it's expensive. When autumn vegetables first arrived 2 months ago, you could buy a lot for a penny, but now the weather is getting colder and winter is about to snow. Green vegetables are also getting fewer and fewer, and prices are going up and down. Moreover, it's not the most expensive time yet. In another month, you won't be able to afford them, Lu explained. Li Xiu nodded when he heard this. In fact, as far as he knew, during the Tang Dynasty, vegetables were not absent in winter. For example, some people had already used hot springs to cultivate vegetables in winter, but the production was very small, all controlled by the royal family. However, there were many members of the royal family, and sometimes even ministers were rewarded. It is estimated that even the current Emperor Li Yuan could not eat fresh vegetables every meal in winter. Perhaps this is a way to make money. Next, Li Xiu chatted with Lu Laoda for a few more words before sending him out. After Lu Laoda left, he almost rushed into the kitchen at a sprint speed of 100 meters, preparing to cook by raising the fire. The people of the Tang Dynasty still used a fire sickle to raise the fire. Li Xiu finally raised the fire, added water to the pot, and sprinkled a few pieces of flour into it to make a pot of the simplest noodle soup. He also cut a small piece of tofu and smashed it with chopsticks. He sprinkled salt on it to make a small onion mixed tofu without scallions or sesame oil. As for the grass carp, he threw it aside because it took too much time to handle it. As soon as the noodle soup was ready, Li Xiu immediately filled himself with a big bowl and drank it while being scalded, shouting loudly. After finally waiting for a bowl of noodle soup to finish, Li Xiu felt that his whole body was much more fulfilled. People who had not experienced hunger may find it difficult to experience the happiness of having food in their stomachs. Finally, Li Xiu drank 3 large bowls of noodles and soup in a row, and the mixed tofu was also eaten clean. At this moment, he let out a long burp and happily returned to the bedroom, lying in bed without wanting to move. People are prone to drowsiness when they are full, and Li Xiu is no exception. In the end, he fell asleep like this. When Li Xiu woke up, the window to the west had already turned yellow. It seemed like dusk had already arrived, and Li Xiu, who had eaten and slept well, felt that his whole body had become much more energetic and his mind had become very agile. He had rid himself of the busy life of his past life, and now he felt as if he had unloaded a huge burden. His whole body was incredibly relaxed. We still need to find some ways to earn some money, at least so that we, as well as Uncle Lu and his tenants, don't have to go hungry this winter. Li Xiu suddenly spoke to himself at this moment. If you want to enjoy a leisurely life, money must be essential. Otherwise, you can't even guarantee what you eat and wear, so he still enjoys it. Thinking of this, Li Xiu immediately began to consider the issue of making money. The first thing he thought of was the information he had received from Mr. Lu before. If he could plant vegetables in winter, he could definitely make a big profit. However, if he wanted to plant vegetables, he had to build a greenhouse, which would definitely require a lot of investment. But in his current situation, where would he find money to build a greenhouse? Chapter 4. Ways to Make Money. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Money is always the easiest way to make money. It's really difficult to start from scratch. After thinking for a while, Li Xiu finally gave up the idea of building a greenhouse temporarily. He decided to think of a quick and effective way to make money with less investment, and it's not too late to build a greenhouse when he has some savings. However, although Li Xiu had more than 1,000 years of experience than the people of the Tang Dynasty, it was not easy to come up with a nearly devoid way to make money in a short period of time. Therefore, he lay in bed for a long time and came up with many ways, but none of them were suitable for him now. In the end, he also felt a bit restless and decided to get up from bed and go outside to change his mood. Maybe he could come up with some good way. At dusk, the mountains behind the courtyard undulated like a winding golden dragon under the setting sun. In front of him was a slowly flowing small river, with several migratory birds playing on the shimmering surface. When Li Xiu approached, the water birds were startled and their wings quickly patted the water surface. Finally, they flew into the sky against the setting sun, fulfilling the saying, "The sunset and the lone duck fly together, and the autumn water grows in the same color." Li Xiuxin enjoyed this rare beauty in later generations, and his footsteps couldn't help but light up. Unconsciously, he came to the riverbank and stepped on a small bridge made of several logs to the opposite bank. Beside the riverbank was dozens of acres of land belonging to Li Xiu, all of which were the highest quality. The annual output was also quite high, but unfortunately, the situation in recent years was not good, and natural disasters and man-made disasters kept happening, which made the lives of Li Xiu and his tenants not very easy. After crossing the small bridge, there is a winding field path. At the end of the path is the Li family village where Mr. Lu and his tenants live. It is now dinner time, and a few households in the village have started to smoke. Seeing this, Li Xiu suddenly had an idea. He wanted to see with his own eyes what Lu Laoda and these tenants at the bottom of Tang society usually eat. As soon as the above idea first appeared in Li Xiu's mind, it immediately grew like wild grass. However, it was not appropriate to visit empty-handed, so Li Xiu turned around and went home to pick up the grass carp he caught today. He then returned to the village and found the home of Mr. Lu in his memory. This is a small courtyard, surrounded by a fence to serve as a wall. The gate is only a wooden frame, and a movable fence serves as the gate. There are only 3 thatched cottages in the courtyard, with a grass shed on the left serving as the kitchen. Standing outside the courtyard, one can see Mr. Lu and his mother-in-law cooking in the kitchen, and 3 children playing in the yard. The oldest is 11 or 12 years old, and the youngest is only 3 or 4 years old. As far as Li Xiu knows, Mr. Lu originally had 2 sons, who were older than him, but they all died on the battlefield a few years ago. This situation was very common in the early Tang Dynasty, and almost every family died in war. Uncle Lu. Li Xiu shouted outside the door. Yo, homemaker, why are you here? Lu Laoda saw Li Xiu outside the door and quickly put down the firewood in his hand to welcome him out. He also warmly invited Li Xiu into the yard. In contrast, when Lu Laoda's wife and several children saw Li Xiu, they all seemed a bit cramped, especially the eldest girl, who was 11 or 12 years old, and quickly ran into the house holding her younger brother. Uncle Lu, thank you very much for bringing me food today. Coincidentally, I caught a fish today and brought it to you. Li Xiu smiled and handed the fish in his hand. Master, you're too polite. What other fish are you bringing to my place? Although Mr. Lu declined, he smiled brightly because Li Xiu was able to bring a gift to his door, indicating that he valued him. So he didn't refuse after speaking. He took the grass carp and handed it to his mother-in-law, saying, Go, cook the fish, and then let Sun Yang go fetch some wine. I'll have a drink with the master. Uncle Lu, there's no need for alcohol. Let's just talk a few words like this. Before Lu could finish speaking, Li Xiu quickly stopped him. In his past life, he had a strong aversion to the taste of alcohol, but sometimes he couldn't resist it for socializing. As a result, he would vomit every time he finished drinking. Now that he's traveling to the Tang Dynasty, he has made up his mind not to drink anymore. Moreover, it's now the year of famine, and the price of alcohol must be even higher. Lu's family doesn't even have enough food for the winter, so he can't let him spend any more money. Lu Laoda originally insisted on buying wine, but Li Xiu insisted on not letting it go, which made him dispel the idea. Then the two sat down at a small table next to the kitchen and chatted. After a while, Lu's wife cooked the fish and brought it up. However, Li Xiu smiled bitterly in his heart. The cooking techniques of the Tang Dynasty were still very primitive, except for boiling and grilling. Cooking techniques such as stir-frying had not yet appeared. For example, the fish in front of him was actually cooked with white water and salt, and there was no scallion, ginger, or garlic. The fishy smell rushed to his nose, and Li Xiu took a chopstick and didn't want to take a second bite. In contrast, Mr. Lu even took a few big bites of fish and meat, with an expression of enjoyment on his face, as if he was savoring a rare delicacy. At this moment, Mrs. Lu also invited the children to eat in the kitchen. When these children saw the boiled fish in front of Li Xiu, they all showed a greedy expression. However, soon they were scolded by Mrs. Lu, and then they dared to sneak a glance at Li Xiu's side, and then lowered their heads as if they were a thief. Seeing this, Li Xiu couldn't help sighing. He also had a deeper understanding of the hardships of the people's life in the early Tang Dynasty. At this time, the Lu's wife brought 2 bowls of rice to Li Xiu. When Li Xiu saw what was in the bowl, he was even more shocked, because the bowl was a kind of congee with yellow and black, emitting a taste that Li Xiu was familiar with and unfamiliar with. In his previous life, he was also a child from the countryside. When he was a child, he remembered that someone had fed pigs, and that pig food was that taste, and pig food was usually cooked with the bran left by milling flour, plus some wild vegetables, which was almost the same as the bowl of food in front of him. It makes no difference. Uncle Lu, do you usually eat these? Li Xiu asked in a sinking voice, thinking of the 2 bags of white flour that Mr. Lu had sent him before, and looking at the bowl of pig food in front of him, his eyes couldn't help but feel a bit sour. Hee, the times are not good this year. If you can have a stutter, you have to thank the heavens. Lu Laoda smiled with a hint of embarrassment, because Li Xiu is a rare guest. He shouldn't have used these basic meals to entertain guests, but now it's late, and when Li Xiu arrived, they had already prepared their meal, so they can only make do for the time being. Although there was a locust plague this year, didn't we end up rushing to harvest some food? Uncle Lu, please don't work too hard for yourself and your family. Li Xiu thought that Lu was reluctant to eat food, so he spoke up and advised. Master, you have a heart, but although there is some food, there are still 3 months left from now to next year, and we will have to endure a spring famine in the future. In all, it will take half a year. We dare not eat that little food at home indiscriminately, and it will be saved for our lives. Lu Laoda said in the end, with a serious expression on his face. He has gone through countless famines in his life and has accumulated rich experience. In his meticulous calculation, every grain of food needs to be used on the blade. Uncle Lu, I think we can't just rely on hard work to make a living. We need to find a way to earn some money and improve the situation in the village. Li Xiu sighed once again and finally expressed his thoughts. Although he didn't think of a good way to make money yet, there would be solutions sooner or later, provided that he organized these tenants, otherwise it would be difficult for him alone to achieve things. Upon hearing Li Xiu's words, Mr. Lu's simple and honest face also showed an excited expression. He immediately patted his thigh and said, "Master, this sentence has hit my heart. It's just that we tenants don't have much knowledge and can't think of ways to make money. Master, you are a scholar, so you must have more knowledge than us. Moreover, you have great kindness to us tenants, so as long as you say a word, whatever we are asked to do is fine." Li Xiu and others are just like Lu Laoda's words, but although he has many ways to make money, he has not yet thought of a suitable one for the current situation, which makes him feel a bit headache. Pa Wu Wu, at this moment, suddenly there was a crisp slapping sound in the nearby kitchen, followed by the crying of a child, and then the angry scolding of the Lu family's wife. This surprised Li Xiu as he turned his head to look, only to see the youngest child of the Lu family crying loudly, with a clear slap mark on her face, and the Lu family's wife lying on the ground picking up something while cursing. "Grandma Gua, why are you making so much noise? I didn't see that the master's house is here." Mr. Lu also glared at his wife and cursed, "After all, there are guests at home, so making such noise is disrespectful to them. What's wrong?" Li Xiu also stood up and took a few steps forward, only to see Mrs. Lu lying on the ground picking up the soybeans one by one. The crying child also had a few freshly chewed beans in his mouth, which made him seem to have guessed something in an instant. "My younger brother is stealing soybeans." At this moment, the eldest girl named Sun Yang explained. She looked only 11 or 12 years old, but in Li Xiu's memory, Sun Yang seemed to be 13 or 14 years old. According to the customs of the Tang Dynasty, she was about to get married, but due to years of poor nutrition, she looked very thin and small, and her flat figure didn't seem to be developing at all. "You scumbag, hit me hard." Lu Laoda angrily pointed at his son and cursed upon hearing this. "Uncle Lu, it's just a few beans. The child will eat them, so don't be angry." Li Xiu hurriedly persuaded him. He also took his bowl of congee and put some pieces of fish on it, which was sent to the crying child. As a result, the little guy stopped crying immediately, and his dirty hands picked up a bowl bigger than his face and ate it. Li Xiu's face still needs to be given. Mr. Lu glared at his younger son a few times before reluctantly saying to Li Xiu, "Master, you don't know that these soybeans are not from my family, but from the hard work of our 5 tenants. Moreover, they are not for people to eat. They are mainly used to fatten the only plowing cow in the village. Only in autumn can the cow fatten up and have the strength to work next year. Other tenants believe me and then hand over all the bean feed to me for safekeeping. If anyone finds out that my son is stealing the bean feed, it will be a big loss if they say so." Upon hearing Lu's words, Li Xiu remembered that there was still a cow in the village. For the farmers, the life of a plowed cow was more precious than that of a human. Even if a person went hungry, they couldn't let the cow go hungry because the whole village was working with this plowed cow. Therefore, the food standards for plowed cows were even higher than those for humans. In addition to eating grass, they also had to eat beans to supplement their energy, and even ate high-protein foods such as eggs when working. Beans. I have a solution. Li Xiu suddenly had a flash of inspiration at this moment, thinking of a feasible way to get rich. This made him couldn't help but be overjoyed, and he almost jumped up with joy. Chapter 5. Sending bean sprouts, seeking recommendation and collection. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. In Li Xiu's kitchen, a stove was burning vigorously, making the room warm. Li Xiu struggled to bring in a large wooden basin, which contained half a basin of well water. Then he took down the kettle from the stove, poured the hot water into the basin, and stirred it with his hands from time to time until the water temperature was about the same as room temperature. He then put down the kettle, picked up a ladle, and carefully sprinkled the warm water from the basin onto a water tank on the ground. Having a water tank in the kitchen was originally a common thing, but Li Xiu's water tank in the kitchen was somewhat special. Firstly, there was no water in the tank, but instead it was filled with sand. There seemed to be something underneath the sand, but it was temporarily invisible. Moreover, the entire water tank was placed on two benches with a basin underneath. When Li Xiu poured water on top, the water flowed through the heavy sand to the bottom of the tank, and then through a hole at the bottom, it flowed into the basin below. Li Xiu was very careful when pouring water, trying to pour all the parts of the water tank as much as possible. After pouring a basin of water, he poured out the water in the lower basin and carefully inspected the water tank and stove before leaving with peace of mind. In the following days, Li Xiu occasionally came in to add fuel to the stove, keeping the room at a relatively high temperature. For days later, the surface of the sand in the water tank had already raised one small bump after another. When he smoothed off the sand on top, he exposed the white and tender buds below, and the yellow and tender cotyledons on top were still covered in green sprouts, which were very common mung bean sprouts in later generations. You really succeeded. Li Xiu couldn't help but laugh loudly as he looked at the mung bean sprouts under the sand. A few days ago, when he was with Mr. Lu, he saw a flash of inspiration from the scattered soybeans on the ground. Finally, he came up with a quick and effective way to make money, which was to make bean sprouts. He was originally worried that bean sprouts had already appeared in the Tang Dynasty, but after asking Mr. Lu, he found out that there were no bean sprouts in the winter market, at least not in Chang'an City. This further strengthened Li Xiu's determination. In fact, what Li Xiu didn't know was that bean sprouts had a long history, but like the fate of many foods, they were initially only used as a medicinal herb. It wasn't until the Song Dynasty that they began to be used as a food, especially winter vegetables that appeared in the market. As for the early Tang Dynasty, no one even thought of using bean sprouts for cooking. It's not difficult to make bean sprouts, the key is to maintain the temperature and water regularly. In his past life, due to the toxic bean sprouts, Li Xiu's wife was worried about the safety of the bean sprouts she bought in the market, so she made her own bean sprouts at home. Anyway, in winter, there is no need to worry about the temperature of the heating system at home. Just water it every 4 or 5 hours, and Li Xiu remembered it after seeing it a few times. At present, Li Xiu took out the bean sprouts from the sand. Previously, when he was making bean sprouts, he sprinkled a layer of beans over a layer of sand, so the yield of bean sprouts in the entire water tank was very high. Finally, he filled several large bamboo baskets, but he found that the container in the water tank was not very easy to take out the bean sprouts. If it were replaced with a wooden bucket with a removable bottom, it would be much simpler. This is a method that can be improved, and we can wait until later. After taking out the bean sprouts, Li Xiu found some unsatisfactory aspects, such as the longer upper layer of bean sprouts and the shorter middle and lower layer of bean sprouts, which looked somewhat uneven, but this did not affect the consumption of bean sprouts. In addition, the reason why Li Xiu chose to make mung bean sprouts is twofold. Firstly, mung bean sprouts have a fresh taste, unlike yellow bean sprouts with a bean smell, which is relatively easy to accept in terms of taste. After all, the emergence of a new food definitely requires recognition from others. Secondly, he also likes to eat mung bean sprouts. Since they are all made from bean sprouts, he naturally needs to choose one that he likes. Anyway, the bean feed for cows is very mixed, including soybeans, mung beans, and black beans. It was already night, but Li Xiu still excitedly walked out the door, holding a large bowl of mung bean sprouts in his hand. He wanted to show his invention to Lu Laoda, preferably to let them take the bean sprouts to Chang'an City to try and see if they could sell at a high price. Although he felt that bean sprouts could definitely attract the attention of the Chang'an nobles who rarely see vegetables throughout the winter, they also needed to be tested by facts, so he was a bit nervous at this time. By the dim candlelight of the lantern, walking through the uneven field path, it was only around 7 or 8 o'clock at night. However, in this era, there were no entertainment options at night, and poor families were unwilling to consume lamp oil, so most people went to bed early. When Li Xiu arrived at the Li family village, the whole village was already quiet, with only the local dog barking occasionally. Li Xiu patted the doorpost of Mr. Lu and called out a few times. It was estimated that Mr. Lu inside was not asleep either. He quickly ran out of the room wearing clothes. When he saw Li Xiu outside, he was also very surprised and said, "Master, why are you so late?" "Uncle Lu, I succeeded." Li Xiu finally had the opportunity to share his joy with others. What succeeded? Mr. Lu had not yet figured out the situation, but he still opened the door and invited Li Xiu in. "Look at this." Li Xiu handed the large bowl in his hand to Lu Laoda and brought the lantern closer so that he could see the bean sprouts clearly. Is this bean sprout?" Mr. Lu was also very surprised when he saw the bean sprouts in the bowl. He had been planting for so many years, and naturally recognized the bean sprouts at a glance. He also remembered that Li Xiu had asked him about the bean sprouts before, which made him vaguely understand something. "That's right, it's bean sprouts, and it's also a vegetable. If we take it to the market to sell, there should be many people buying it. With this business, our village won't have to worry about winter food shortage." Li Xiu said excitedly again. "But can bean sprouts really be eaten?" Mr. Lu still said with some disbelief. Although he has grown beans for many years, he has never eaten bean sprouts. After all, for a farmer's family, a bean sprout is a crop, and even if one dies, it will make him feel heartbroken for half a day, let alone take it to the kitchen to cook. Of course it can be eaten, and the taste is particularly good. "Uncle Lu, you go to the other heads of the family in the village and call them over. Let's discuss how to do this bean sprout business." Li Xiu then showed a confident look, although he was not sure if bean sprouts were popular at the beginning. If he didn't have confidence, Lu and his team would probably have even less confidence. Mr. Lu showed great respect to Li Xiu, so he agreed without hesitation upon hearing his words. He turned around and went out to call for others. In no time, the men from the other 4 families also came dressed. The 5 households in the village were actually considered as one family, with 2 of them being Mr. Lu's younger brother and the other 2 being Mr. Lu's brother-in-law, surnamed Zhang. One was named Zhang Feng, and the other was named Zhang Shou. You can tell from their names that they are from the village. In fact, when Li Xiu's mother entrusted the management of the village to Lu Laoda, the tenant also asked him to find it himself. Therefore, Lu Lao nature wanted to treat and take care of his family members well. Moreover, both his 2 younger brothers and his 2 younger uncles were honest villagers, and Lu Laoda was the oldest and most prestigious, making it convenient for him to manage them in his daily life. A few wealthy men gathered in Mr. Lu's yard because it was dark and cold, so Mr. Lu lit a fire in the yard. Li Xiu sat in the middle, explaining with bean sprouts, and then let them pass it on. Everyone also tasted the taste of bean sprouts. Although they were raw, they were not bad either. "Master, this bean sprout tastes quite refreshing, but I'm not sure if they're willing to buy it. After all, no one has ever eaten it before." At this moment, a middle-aged man sitting on the right side of Li Xiu spoke up. This person has a very distinctive appearance, and the most noteworthy thing is that his eyes are one big and one small, which looks a bit comical. This person is Lu Laoda's second brother, and I gave him the nickname Lu Dian because his smaller eye looks normal, while his other eye is a few circles larger than the average person, which gave him the nickname Big-Eyed Uncle. Even younger generations call him Big-Eyed Uncle. Uncle Big Eyes is thoughtful. Our bean sprouts are a new vegetable, and if we want others to quickly open up the market, we naturally need a means of promotion. Li Xiu was suddenly taken aback when he said this. He had committed an occupational disease and explained all the speeches he used to give employees meetings in later generations. He completely forgot that this was the early Tang Dynasty, and the people in front of him, Mr. Lu, were not his own employees. Now they all looked at him in confusion because they couldn't understand what Li Xiu meant by market, sales, and so on. Seeing this, Li Xiu couldn't help but laugh at himself. He had originally decided to let his work go to hell after traveling, but he didn't expect to do the same thing again in order to survive. He no longer explained, but turned his head to Lu Lao Dao and said, "Uncle Lu, go call out Aunt Lu. I have something to tell her." Chapter 6. Bean Sprouts on the Market, recommended for collection. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The eastern sky has just turned white, and the curfew in Chang'an City has finally been lifted. Various gates have been opened, and the streets of Chang'an have once again become lively. If the busiest place in Chang'an City is undoubtedly the East and West markets, but in the morning, most shops in the East and West markets have not yet opened. At this time, the busiest place is the vegetable market, and almost every street in Chang'an City has its own vegetable market. However, the largest and most complete vegetable market is also the Luan Vegetable Market near Anhua Gate. The Luan Market is naturally located within the Luan Square, which is one of the closest markets to Anhua Gate. Due to the convenience of entering and exiting the city gate, many vegetable farmers outside the city bring their own vegetables here for sale. The wealthy families in the city also like to choose fresh vegetables and meat here. Over time, this has formed the largest and most complete vegetable market in Tokyo, and as long as there is something available for sale on the market, it can be found here. Su Guanshi, along with 2 servants, drove a carriage to the Luan market. After getting off the carriage, he plunged into the market to select the ingredients needed by the government. Rice, flour, oil, and salt were all within his selection range, and many vendors in the market knew him. When he saw him, he greeted him and promoted his products to him. However, Su Guanshi was very picky when buying things, and if the quality was not good, he would definitely not take a second look. When it comes to Su Guanshi, his background is quite significant. His master is Pei Ji, who is known as the first prime minister of the Tang Dynasty. When Li Yuan was still stationed in Taiyuan, Pei Ji was the deputy supervisor of the Jinyang Palace in Taiyuan. Moreover, the two of them had an old friendship, so they often drank and played together, and even women could play with each other. The depth of friendship was no longer like friends, but more like a pair of good friends. Later, when Li Yuan rose up in rebellion, Pei Ji also made great efforts. After the establishment of the Tang Dynasty, he was appointed as the right assistant minister of the imperial secretariat. Moreover, Li Yuan was a person who cherished old feelings, and even if he became an emperor, he still called Pei Ji Pei Jian. This was Pei Ji's old name during his time in Taiyuan, which indicates Li Yuan's favor towards him. A few years ago, another important hero who rose up with Li Yuan, Lu Wenjing, was jealous of Pei Ji's higher official position and often targeted her. However, in the end, Li Yuan actually killed Lu Wenjing. Later, when Pei Ji attacked Song Jingang, he suffered a disastrous defeat but was only symbolically demoted by Li Yuan. He quickly regained his official position and was favored as before. With a master like Pei Ji, even a small purchasing manager in the Pei Mansion, Su Guanshi was not someone ordinary people dared to offend. The staple food was bought quickly, but Steward Su was worried at the moment. Others only saw the scenery of the steward of Pei's house, but did not know his difficulties. Mr. Pei was famous for his cunning mouth. The ingredients for cooking had strict regulations, such as only Huainan rice for rice and Guangzhong sheep for mutton. Although these requirements were cumbersome, they could still be done with a little thought. But some requirements were more troublesome. For example, in winter, Mr. Pei required at least one dish of vegetables every day, and could not be duplicated within 3 days, which was more troublesome. Eating fresh vegetables every day in winter is almost impossible for many nobles, and only the royal family can barely do it. There are hot springs on the West Mountain, and some vegetables can be planted in winter, but the yield is not high and can only be supplied to the royal family. However, Pei Ji has a special relationship with Li Yuan, so his family also enjoys the same treatment. However, this autumn, there was a locust plague in Guangzhou, and the West Mountain was also affected. The number of vegetables produced is even smaller. Now, they can only be delivered every 5 days, and only enough to eat for 2 days. The remaining 3 days need to be solved by himself. A while ago, it was a bit better because the weather was just getting colder, and although vegetables were getting fewer and fewer, you could always find some with some money. However, as the weather became colder, Manager Su now has money but can't find vegetables. He has been buying carrots for several days now, and this thing can be hidden underground for a winter. But my husband is at least a prime minister of a country, and it's not a problem to keep gnawing on carrots. Moreover, the butler scolded him yesterday. If he buys carrots again today, he will stuff the whole carrot into his nostrils. Thinking of this, Manager Su couldn't help but sigh. He had bought all the things he needed today, except for fresh vegetables. Now he only hopes to see someone selling lotus roots in the market. Previously, lotus roots were transported from the south every winter, but this year Lu Haida returned and occupied many parts of Hebei and Shandong, especially the northern section of the canal, which fell into the hands of the other party. Without this waterway, it was difficult to transport goods from both the north and south, so he hasn't seen anyone selling lotus roots this year. At present, Su Guancher went to several familiar vendors to ask, and the answer he received was extremely disappointing. There were no lotus roots to sell in the entire Luan vegetable market, because of Lu Haida's rebellion, which made him secretly curse the other party in his heart. It was said that the crown prince had personally led troops to quell the rebellion this time, and there was also the 3 women who had made remarkable military achievements, namely the Princess Pingyang, the crown prince's sister, who also went with him to quell the rebellion. It is estimated that Lu Haida will not be able to jump for long. Su Guancher is just a small person who is not very interested in such military and state affairs. After cursing Lu Haida a few times, he can only wander around the huge vegetable market with last hope, hoping to find vegetables other than carrots, otherwise he will wait to face punishment when he returns. Ha! What's so fragrant? Just as Steward Su was aimlessly wandering around the market, he suddenly smelled a strange aroma, similar to the aroma emitted from cooking in the kitchen. However, he often wandered around the kitchen in the mansion, but he had never smelled this aroma before. Moreover, this aroma was particularly attractive, and just this faint smell made him drool a bit. In fact, not only Su Guancher, but many people around also smelled this tempting fragrance, which made many people want to find out where this smell came from. After a while, someone finally found the source of the fragrance in an inconspicuous corner of the market. This is a somewhat strange vegetable stall, with several large baskets on the ground covered with white cloth, making it difficult for people to see what is inside. Behind the stall, there are 2 honest rural men squatting, looking no different from those farmers who came early to buy vegetables. However, these 2 people squat there without shouting, and others don't even know what they are selling. Behind this small stall, a simple curtain was set up with 2 pieces of rags, and behind the curtain, there was a crisp collision sound of iron spoons and pots. The Su steward, who was watching, was very familiar with this sound. When the kitchen in the mansion was cooking, this sound could be heard across several yards, and the fragrance emanating from behind the curtain also confirmed that there were indeed people cooking here. With curiosity in his heart, Steward Su finally approached the 2 rural men behind the stall and asked, "Brothers, why are you cooking here in the curtains behind you? This is a vegetable market, not a restaurant." The 2 rural men were very polite. Upon hearing Manager Su's question, one of them immediately stood up with a simple smile and said, "This guest, wait a moment. The dishes inside are about to be ready. You can taste them later. The man didn't say what the dish was, which made Manager Su even more curious. However, just as his words finished, the sound of cooking behind the curtain finally stopped. Then, when the curtain was lifted, a thick rural woman came out with a small bowl, which was steaming hot and emitting a tempting aroma. This made Manager Su and others involuntarily sniffle. Due to the attraction of the aroma, the stall was already surrounded by people. At this moment, the rural man behind the stall loudly said, "Brothers, we are farmers from Lijiazwang outside the city. This time, we have grown a new vegetable that tastes very delicious. If you don't believe it, this is a dish that my mother-in-law just made with vegetables. Everyone can come and try it, it's free." The rural man pointed to the small pot in the farmer's hand and saw a strange vegetable inside. It was only a few inches long, very thin, and crystal clear, looking extremely beautiful. However, no one had ever seen this vegetable before. "I'll give it a try." Steward Su, who had long been captivated by the aroma, didn't hesitate to pick up a few chopsticks from a small bowl and put them in his mouth. They were fragrant, crispy, tender, and refreshing with a hint of appetizing sourness. They should have added vinegar inside, making people want to eat them again after eating them. "Delicious, it's so delicious." Su Guanshi praised loudly while eating. As the kitchen assistant of the Pei Mansion, he had almost tasted all the delicious food in the world, but it was still the first time he had tasted such a delicious dish. He was very keen to find that the dish itself tasted refreshing and was indeed a rare and good vegetable. However, the most important thing was this unknown cooking technique. He dared to bet that the chefs in the mansion would not know this cooking technique. There were also many other aristocratic mansions around who came to buy the steward, some of whom even knew the steward Su. When they saw that even he praised this dish, many people immediately gathered around to taste it. After tasting it, everyone exclaimed loudly. Among them, the steward Su reacted the fastest and threw down his chopsticks while others were tasting it. He ran to the stall and shouted to the rural man, "How much does your dish cost? Give me 10 pounds. 2.21 per kilogram." The rural man spoke with some embarrassment. In his opinion, 21 per kilogram is already a sky-high price, which can easily buy a bushel of grain. "No problem, bring the money." Steward Su didn't even bargain and immediately instructed his mother behind him, because at this time in previous years, the price of lotus roots was much higher than this. Fresh vegetables weighing 21 per kilogram were already very cheap. The servants of Pei Mansion immediately took out 200 won and delivered it to the stall. Looking at the 200 won copper coins delivered in front of them, the two rural men behind the stall, including the woman who cooked, also showed a surprised expression. They probably didn't expect to sell so much so easily. However, in the end, the rural man suddenly smiled bitterly and said, "This customer, I can't sell it to you." Chapter 7. Hidden Worries Under a Beautiful Future. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Manager Su finally encountered such a new vegetable, and what's even more rare is its delicious taste. So he decided to buy 10 pounds as soon as he made his move. After all, the Pei family has a lot of business, and there are many ladies and young masters in the mansion. Buying too little is not enough to eat. As for money and other things, there's no need to worry. Will the Tang Dynasty Prime Minister's mansion be short of money? What he never expected was that the other party said they couldn't sell it to him. "Why can't you sell it to me? Aren't you planning to do business?" said Manager Su with an unpleasant expression at the moment. The customer misunderstood because the quantity of bean sprouts we planted this time was not very large, and the total weight was only about 10 pounds. Moreover, our host said that the main purpose of going to the city this time was to promote the reputation of bean sprouts, so we can only provide limited supply, and each person can only buy 1 pound at a time. The rural man who sold vegetables apologized and explained that he was Lu Lauda, as well as his brother-in-law Zhang Feng, and his wife was the one who stir-fried the vegetables. As for the method of stir-frying, it was naturally taught to her by Li Xiu. Upon hearing Lu's words, Manager Su was also taken aback and immediately understood the intentions of the other party's owner. It seems that the other party has a lot of ambition, and limited supply can naturally allow more people to taste the delicious bean sprouts. When they sell it again next time, more people will definitely buy it. It seems that the other party's owner really knows how to do business. Although Pei Ji held a high position of power, he was extremely strict with his family's servants and never allowed them to use the reputation of the Pei family to oppress the people. However, 1 pound was also too little. After considering it for a moment, Manager Su suddenly had an idea and pointed to the 2 servants behind him, saying, "We have 3 people here, and each person can buy you 1 pound. Is that okay?" Although Lu Laoda was a banker, he also had some vision. He knew that although the steward Su was dressed as a servant, when he approached to inquire about the price, the people around him dared not approach. Without asking, he knew that the other party's head must be a well-known figure in the city, so he did not dare to offend too much. Upon hearing the other party's proposal, he nodded and weighed him 3 pounds of bean sprouts. Finally, he received 61. After Su Guancher finished buying it, the people who had just tried it rushed forward. "You and I divided up more than 10 pounds of bean sprouts one by one, and in the end, the bean sprouts were sold out." The people who had not bought them still surrounded Lu Laoda and his team, which made Lu Laoda and his 3 people both happy and helpless. They shouted that they would definitely come back to sell bean sprouts in 3 days, and the quantity was even larger, which would definitely satisfy everyone. At this moment, the Wu Ho of the market also arrived. That's how Lu and his team got away. On the way back, Lu and Zhang Feng were excitedly discussing while pushing the unicycle. His wife was even more excited as she sat in the car, holding a bag in her arms and counting the copper coins inside one by one. Although it wasn't the first time she had seen so many copper coins, it was the first time she had made so much money so easily. When Li Xiu borrowed some beans from her house before, she was still a bit reluctant, but didn't dare to say it clearly, "But I didn't expect that the beans, which cost less than a few won, would be exchanged for over 300 won. If this business can continue for a long time, how much do they have to earn?" People feel refreshed during happy occasions, and Lu and his companions can't help but walk a lot more briskly. Originally, they only needed half an hour on the road to return. At this time, Li Xiu and several other tenants were waiting in Lu's courtyard. When Lu's wife placed the bag containing copper coins on the table and heard the sound of copper coins hitting inside, Li Xiu's face couldn't help but show a slight relaxed smile. After arriving at the Tang Dynasty, he finally solved the problem of eating. "Master, you haven't seen those people buying things today." At first, no one paid attention to us. It wasn't until my mother-in-law cooked the bean sprouts that those people immediately gathered around and rushed to buy them all. After they sold out, those people still surrounded us and didn't let us go. Finally, it was the arrival of Marquis Wu that made us leave. Lu Laoda then excitedly told Li Xiu about his experience of selling bean sprouts today. For the first time in his life, he was also surrounded and welcomed by so many people, and Zhang Feng next to him was also telling other tenants about their detailed experiences, which surprised them all. They were completely unfamiliar with the world. "Uncle Lu, today is just a marketing trial, which can only be considered as a preliminary opening of the market. Only a few days later, when the second batch of bean sprouts is launched, can it be considered as real money making." Li Xiu smiled and spoke. Although Mr. Lu didn't understand many of his words, he already understood that as long as he followed the owner, there would be great days waiting for them in the future. Li Xiu didn't pay a penny for the over 300 when he earned today. Instead, he asked Mr. Lu to buy beans, mainly mung beans. As for soybeans, they can be sold later. In addition, the Zhang Feng brothers know some carpentry skills, so Li Xiu asked them to make some simple frames. A few women wove bamboo into flat bamboo baskets and placed them layer by layer on the shelves. This is the method that Li Xiu came up with for sprouting beans. The bamboo baskets are well ventilated and permeable, which is very suitable for sprouting beans. Of course, these things cannot be done in just 1 or 2 days. In order to prepare the next batch of bean sprouts as soon as possible, while busy with these things, Li Xiu asked Mr. Lu to collect some broken jars and pots, all of which were piled up in a warm room for sprouting. Due to a shortage of manpower, even the children were mobilized to water the bean sprouts every 2 hours. 3 days later, the second batch of bean sprouts was finally ready. In order to maintain the continuity of bean sprout supply, Li Xiu had people make a new batch of bean sprouts every day, so there will be a third and fourth batch tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow the first batch of bean sprouts had already gained some fame in the market, so when the second and third batches of bean sprouts were launched, they were almost completely looted in the blink of an eye. Some even stood guard in front of the city gate. As long as Mr. Lu pushed a car past the city gate, they would run forward and stop the car to buy bean sprouts because there were too many people in the market, and the production of bean sprouts was still insufficient, so many times they couldn't even grab them. Thanks to the sales of bean sprouts, Mr. Lu and his team have brought back more and more copper coins each time. Although many of them are used by Li Xiu to purchase various utensils, there is still a lot of surplus in the end. Moreover, more and more people come to the city every day to sell bean sprouts. Now all the men in Li's village have already taken action, and even some middle-aged boys have followed their elders to the city to sell bean sprouts, which is considered half a labor force. Women take care of the growth of bean sprouts from dawn to dusk every day, and the entire village has become a miniature bean sprout production base. Half a month later, Li Xiu gathered all the people in the village together. This time, it was not with Mr. Lu, but on the threshing ground outside the village. It was already evening and the weather was too cold, so Li Xiu lit a fire on the open space in the field. Everyone gathered around the fire. Originally, Li Xiu wanted Mr. Lu to buy some cooked meat and other food, and everyone chatted while eating, but most people opposed it because it was too wasteful and expensive. There are only 5 households in the entire Li family village, with a total of 30.7 people from all ages. Now, they are all here. At first, the entire valley was in chaos, with the noise of children, the voices of women, and the laughter of men coming and going. It wasn't until Li Xiu stood up to signal everyone to be quiet that the entire valley fell silent. Everyone has been working hard during this period, but their hard work has not been in vain. Now the business of bean sprouts has also been on the right track, with several transactions recorded every day. You no longer have to worry about not having enough money to buy food. Li Xiu spoke very directly, speaking to these tenants without going through too many detours. Just say what you want to say so that everyone can understand. After hearing this, there was no need to worry about starving anymore. Everyone present cheered happily, but Li Xiu had not finished speaking yet. He gestured for everyone to calm down again and continued, I have seen everyone's hard work, so I invite everyone to come today for only one thing. To share the money. After Li Xiu finished speaking, he turned around and struggled to pull out a large burlap bag from behind. Finally, he managed to drag the burlap bag to the middle of the field, and then continued, everyone, we have made a lot of money by selling bean sprouts in the past half-month. Apart from the cost and some necessary expenses, according to the sharing standard we discussed with Uncle Lu and others before, I plan to share half of the net profit with everyone. Wow! As soon as Li Xiu finished speaking, the entire venue was in an uproar. Except for the naive child, everyone looked at Li Xiu in surprise. Although they didn't know how much half of the net profit was, they could guess a lot just by looking at the weight of the burlap bag in Li Xiu's hand, which made many people excited. In contrast, although Mr. Lu and a few other men in charge of the household were also excited, they could at least control their emotions because they had already known in advance, and even when Li Xiu proposed to distribute profits to them, they firmly refused because they believed that the solution was Li Xiu's idea. They had only been working with Li Xiu for the past half-month, so Li Xiu only needed to pay their wages, just like working in winter before, men earn 2 cents a day and women and children earn 1 penny a day. In this way, each family earns over 100 cents a month, which is already a very generous compensation. However, Li Xiu insisted on distributing the profits to Mr. Lu and his team, because selling bean sprouts was originally to improve the life in the village and could be considered as a reward for his previous 2 bags of flour. Moreover, for him, the income from selling bean sprouts was not much. Now that he had capital, as long as he was willing, he could come up with more ways to make money. However, Lu and his team believed that this was taking advantage of Li Xiu's situation. After Li Xiu persuaded them for a long time, Lu and his team were willing to accept half of the profit. At present, Li Xiu personally poured out the copper coins from the bag and divided them into 5 parts for Mr. Lu and the others to take away. Each family received at least 2 coins, which brought the entire threshing ground to a climax. The old man couldn't close his toothless mouth with a smile, the children sang and danced, and the woman was so excited that she hugged her own copper coins and didn't let go. They lived for half a lifetime, and it was also the first time they had so many copper coins, and this was only half a month's worth of sharing. If we work until the end of the year, every family will become wealthy. Looking at everyone's happy expression, Li Xiu once again announced that tomorrow is the beginning of winter, so he was planning to have someone buy a pig for everyone to eat a pig-killing meal, and also distribute some pork to reward everyone. This ignited everyone's enthusiasm, and the folk customs of the Tang Dynasty were open. Many people had already started singing and dancing around the fire. Li Xiu looked at the smiling faces by the fire pile one after another, with a relaxed expression on his face. As the saying goes, invest in me with wooden peaches, repay me with Qiong Yao. The tenants of Li family village sent 2 bags of flour when he needed help the most, and he rewarded these tenants with a prosperous life. For these tenants, having food and drink is the prosperous era, and they will enter the prosperous era many years earlier than other people in the Tang Dynasty. However, while feeling relaxed in his heart, a hint of hidden concern suddenly flashed in Li Xiu's eyes. Sometimes things go too smoothly, which may not be a good thing. Perhaps in this beautiful prospect, there are hidden dangers that are unknown to everyone. Chapter 8. Pig Killing Rice. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhi, a plump black pig was tied to a stone slab. Perhaps it had already sensed its fate, so it began to scream desperately, complaining about the injustice of the heavens. In despair, it hoped that there would be an extraordinary hero driving the colorful auspicious clouds to save itself. However, at this moment, the hero did not see it, and the butcher had already raised his butcher's knife to attack it. Slow down. At this moment, a dignified voice suddenly shouted out, and the butcher, who was already preparing to cut, finally stopped. This made the already desperate black pig burst out with a burst of hope for life. He opened his eyes wide and looked at the young human who interrupted the butcher's movements. In its dark little eyes, this young human seemed to emit a pure white light all over his body, and there was still a rainbow of auspicious clouds under his feet. This was his hero on earth. Uncle Big Eyes, you are also wasting too much. Pig blood can also be eaten, and you will pour all the blood into this bowl later. Li Xiu said, taking out a large bowl from behind and placing it under the pig's neck. Just now, he watched as Lu Dian was about to cut, but there was no blood-receiving bowl below. It is estimated that the people of the Tang Dynasty did not have the habit of eating blood tofu, so that was why he stopped the other party. After the basin was placed, Li Xiu signaled to Lu Dian that he could take the knife. Speaking of which, slaughtering pigs was a technical task that required finding the right place to die in one fell swoop. Lu Dian's father-in-law was a butcher, and he sometimes went to help, so he would also kill pigs. Otherwise, he would have to hire a professional butcher. Although he didn't pay for it, in the end, things like going into the water were the butcher's reward. Now that Lu Dian took action, these things naturally saved him. At this moment, the black pig on the slate suddenly let out a heart-wrenching roar, which shook Li Xiu involuntarily. He couldn't help but pull out his ear, not knowing if it was an illusion. He felt that the black pig's cry at this moment seemed particularly tragic, even with a hint of determination. This made Li Xiu shake his head involuntarily. It seemed that the impact of time travel on himself had not yet subsided, and such a strange illusion had appeared. Lu Dian stabbed the big artery around the neck of the black pig with a knife, and as the knife was drawn out, a dark red blood spurted out. The black pig's mournful cries slowly weakened, and its struggle became powerless. Finally, it left the world filled with anger and unwillingness. After the pig died, Lu Dian immediately made a small cut on its feet and poked it a few times with a long iron bar before blowing air inside, causing the entire pig body to swell. Then, he put the pig hair in a hot water pot and used a special scraper to scrape it off. Because the pig had air inside, it was so round that it was very convenient to shave. In some places where it was not convenient to shave, boiled rosin was also poured on top to stick the pig hair off. Killing pigs is a lowly profession that is looked down upon by people, but every time a pig is slaughtered, there is a large circle of people around. At this time, it is entirely the time for the pig slayer's performance, and everyone is attracted by his every move. It is estimated that Lu Dian's current mood is similar to those of future celebrities who hold concerts, where they are the focus. The black pig with fur removed immediately turned white, tender, and tender. The following scene was not suitable for children, as the whole pig was hung up and cut open. If placed in later generations, it would definitely be an unsuitable scene for children. However, there was not so much attention paid at this time. The happiest people around were the children in the village, even swallowing saliva while looking at them. Looking at these greedy-looking children, Li Xiu couldn't help but admire their strong taste. After all, they could also drool in front of a bunch of colorful intestines, which is not something that ordinary people can do. The fire had already risen on the threshing ground, and a large iron pot was placed on top of it. The water in the pot had already boiled, and after cleaning the internal organs such as the heart, liver, and kidneys, they were directly thrown into the pot to cook. In addition, some parts of the pig's body that were not very good, as well as some large bones and sticks, were all thrown into one pot to cook. Li Xiu even witnessed Lu Dian flipping over a bowl of intestines and rinsing them twice before pouring them into the pot. He was so scared that he quickly stopped him. If he washed them this way, the soup he boiled probably had a pig manure smell. Others might not care, but he couldn't ignore it. So he decided to personally handle these intestines, as well as the pig head and pig feet, and let Lu Dian keep them for him. If they were all thrown into the pot and boiled together, it would be too wasteful. Some people like pig intestines, while others feel nauseous when they see them. Li Xiu belongs to the former type. He took the pig intestines to the well to personally clean them, but at this time, Lu Laoda's daughter, Sun Yang, ran over and refused to let Li Xiu do them because the people in Zhuangzi believed that Li Xiu was a scholar and did dirty and tiring work like this. In the end, Li Xiu couldn't resist Sun Yang and had to guide her to clean her intestines. Although the intestines are delicious, they are very troublesome to clean. First, sprinkle flour to remove the mucous membrane on the surface of the intestines, and then rub them with salt. These actions were noticed by Lu Laoda and others next to him, who were heartbroken and pumping them one by one. Although Zhuangzi had money, they were still very frugal and didn't want to waste any food. Fortunately, it was Li Xiu who did this. Otherwise, if it were their own child, they would have been beaten to death with a stick. The intestines were washed clean, and Li Xiu took out a section and made a blood sausage with pre-mixed pig blood. The other part was stir-fried, and of course, he also directed the Lu family's wife to cook. After the dish was cooked, it immediately received everyone's praise and was snatched away in the blink of an eye. This made Li Xiu somewhat proud, thinking that his cooking skills had conquered everyone, but later he realized that as long as there was meat, any dish would be snatched away by people. For example, the organs and bones in that big iron pot were snatched away as soon as they were cooked, and in the end, no soup was left. Watching a 3-year-old child holding a pig bone thicker than his thighs and gnawing on it, Li Xiu's face turned oily. Suddenly, he remembered when he was a child, the conditions were not good, and every time he ate meat, it felt like Chinese New Year. At that time, his mood should be similar to those of the farmers in front of him. As long as there was meat to eat, the taste was no longer important. As the head of the household, Li Xiu was personally served a bowl of cooked pork by Mr. Lu. However, when Li Xiu received it, he immediately lost his appetite because the bowl was full of fat, and he couldn't even see a trace of lean meat. This was not because Mr. Lu tricked him, but because in this era, pigs were all raised in free range, like sheep, and the ground was covered in grass. Therefore, pigs had more lean meat than fat, and fat was considered very delicious by ancient people. Only the elderly or noble could enjoy it. For over half a month, there was no meat taste, and Li Xiu was also very greedy, but he had not yet reached the point of eating big fat meat as a meal. Coincidentally, Sun Yang was holding a small bowl filled with many meat bones, which Li Xiu loved to chew on the most. So he grabbed Sun Yang's small bowl and stuffed his fat meat into her. At first, Sun Yang refused, worried about being scolded by her parents, but Li Xiu said he was grateful for helping her with her intestines, so he insisted that she accepted. Finally, the little girl reluctantly nodded and ran to wolf down with her 2 younger brothers, holding the big bowl. After a lively pig-killing meal, Li Xiu then helped everyone divide the pork. He was a bachelor, so he only took 2 pounds of pork, as well as 1 pig head and 4 pig feet. The remaining large pieces of meat were all distributed to Lu and his team. In the afternoon, Li Xiu was alone at home chopping meat into meat fillings, and the noodles were ready to make dumplings. In his previous life, his hometown was located in an ordinary small village in the Central Plains. When he was young, his life was also very difficult, and dumplings were a rare delicacy for his family. Later, his living standards improved. As a result, every holiday, no matter what kind of festival, the family would make dumplings. It goes without saying that during the winter solstice, even the Dragon Boat Festival and National Day, dumplings were also made. Today marks the beginning of winter. If he were still in his past life, his family would probably be making dumplings. Unfortunately, he has now arrived at the Tang Dynasty more than 1,000 years ago. Dumplings have not yet become popular, but it's okay. Anyway, he doesn't have much family now. Making his own dumplings to eat is also a nostalgia for his past life. Li Xiu loves dumplings filled with pork and cabbage the most. He has pork, but not cabbage yet. He remembers that cabbage seems to be a hybrid of 2 vegetables, so he can try to make it in the future. Li Xiu is planning to make dumplings with pork and radish filling, because in winter, only radish is a vegetable. As for using bean sprouts as filling, he has never eaten them before, and bean sprouts are also too expensive. Zhuangzi's situation has just improved, so let's keep bean sprouts for sale. Mix the filling, roll out the dough, and make dumplings. After the water boils, add the dumplings. After a few rolls, the dumplings will be cooked. In Li Xiu's hometown, he likes to eat dumplings with soup. At this time, add salt, vinegar, and scallions to the soup. If there is coriander, it would be even better. After the soup is ready, fill yourself with a bowl full and eat the dumplings. Drink sour soup, which turns the original soup into the original food. No amount of food is greasy. After eating 2 large bowls of dumplings, Li Xiu also felt a bit full. It was already dusk, so he went out for a walk along the small river. Across from Li family village, there was also smoke from cooking, and every household was cooking. The air carried a faint smell of meat. If you listen carefully, you can even hear the laughter of the children, which made Li Xiu feel a faint sense of happiness in his heart. Unconsciously, he arrived at the Huangqiu River and a tall and imposing middle-aged man walked towards him with a fishing tackle. This middle-aged man was the one surnamed Ma who had cooked chicken for Li Xiu. However, the other person seemed to have no good impression of Li Xiu. Seeing him snort coldly, he left, which made Li Xiu also smile helplessly. It seems that he really offended the other person last time. Coincidentally encountering this middle-aged man surnamed Ma, Li Xiu suddenly remembered that he had been busy with the bean sprout business for half a month, and had forgotten to inquire about the origin of the other party from Lu and his team. According to the information previously revealed by the other party, he should be a general of the Tang Dynasty, and he should be able to eat in the same pot with Li Jing. His level should not be low, but he really couldn't remember which general surnamed Ma in the early Tang Dynasty. Thinking of this, Li Xiu originally wanted to go to Mr. Lu's house to inquire, but now it was time for dinner. If he had gone now, he might have been dragged down to eat together, so he decided to ask again tomorrow. However, what Li Xiu never expected was that the next morning, before he could wake up, he was suddenly awakened by a hurried knocking on the door. When he walked out of the room dressed in clothes, he heard Sun Yang's mournful cry from outside the door. "Master, open the door quickly. My father and his family have had an accident." Chapter 9. The Generals Who Self-Proclaimed as Domestic Slaves. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the yard, Mr. Lu and others, who were supposed to be selling vegetables in the city, were lying on the ground in all directions, with painful expressions on their faces and occasional moans. Some of them even had blood on their heads and were haphazardly wrapped with cloth strips, looking even more disheveled. Women and children from various families also gathered here, wiping their tears one by one. "Uncle Lu, what's going on?" Li Xiu ran into the yard and immediately squatted in front of Mr. Lu. Sun Yang cried and ran to call him just now, but couldn't explain what had happened. She only said that Mr. Lu and others were injured, which made Li Xiu very anxious. He ran over without even putting on his clothes. Among these people, Lu Laoda was the most severely injured, not only bleeding from the head, but also swelling his cheeks high, with obvious palm marks on it. It was obvious that he had been beaten, which also made Li Xiu angry. However, as a person of 2 generations, he was already able to control his emotions. The most important thing now is to understand the situation and then make plans. "Master, a disaster has come. Someone is interested in our bean sprouts," Lu Laoda said with a sorrowful and indignant expression at this moment. He didn't take the beating to heart, but the key was that he had just seen Zhuangzi make some progress, and now someone was trying to take away their lifeline. This is what made him feel sad and angry. Li Xiu was also shocked when he heard this, and his most worried thing finally happened. He had never expected that a small bean sprout would bring him several guan of income every day. This was because of insufficient productivity and supply, otherwise he would definitely earn more. With such a large profit, he had always worried that someone would have greed. After all, in any era, there were scumbags who relied on power or violence to seize power. Now he has finally encountered them. What's going on, and what kind of person is the other party? Uncle Lu, please explain it to me in detail. Li Xiu asked again after a moment of silence, with a suppressed anger in his voice. He had originally only wanted to be a small landlord who could not compete with the world, but why did someone take the initiative to provoke him? At present, Mr. Lu explained the process of the incident once again. The whole process was actually very simple and cliché. They woke up before dawn every day, pushed the prepared bean sprouts to the outside of Chang'an City, and when the city gate opened, they went into the market to sell the bean sprouts. However, before they entered the city today, they were stopped by a group of people on the road not far from the city gate, and they were asked how to distribute the bean sprouts. Speaking of which, since the bean sprouts were launched and brought huge profits to Li Xiu and his team, many people have privately studied how to produce bean sprouts, and some have even successfully made the beans grow into bean sprouts. However, they can only spread the beans flat in a container to sprout. To produce more bean sprouts, it requires a lot of space, which is simply not practical. But when they stack the beans together to sprout, they find that they will soon rot. The key is that they have not mastered the trick of watering and cooling. This trick is not worth a penny for those who know, but for those who don't, it requires a long time of exploration. It is precisely because of the above reasons that the technology of producing bean sprouts is still monopolized by the people of Lijiazhuang in a short period of time, which is also the reason why Lu Laoda was stopped by that group of people. Mr. Lu and his team have just tasted the sweetness brought by the bean sprout business, and each of them regards the technique of making bean sprouts as their favorite. Faced with the pressure of these people, they naturally refuse to speak up. However, if these people fail to force them, they immediately take action without any hesitation. Mr. Lu and his team are all honest farmers, and they have naturally suffered a big loss. Moreover, these people have been ruthless in their actions, even the middle-aged and young men of 12 or 13 have been beaten. Upon hearing this, Li Xiu couldn't help but feel extremely angry. He wished he could use his knife to desperately search for those hitters, but in the end, his rationality prevailed and he suppressed his anger, saying, "Uncle Lu, how did you come back? Have those people told you their identities?" Those people didn't reveal their identities, but judging from their appearance, they should be slaves of a certain nobleman in the city. "I still have this insight," said Lu with great certainty. After pausing for a moment, he spoke again. "Originally, those people said they wanted to break my leg, but later I had a sudden idea and shouted that we were tenants of the princess's family. This made them a little afraid and didn't dare to go too far. We took the opportunity to escape, but unfortunately, today's bean sprouts couldn't be pushed back." "Princess? What princess?" Li Xiu was surprised when he heard Lu Laoda's words behind him. He couldn't understand why Lu Laoda suddenly pulled out a princess. "It's just the princess, master. How could you forget that almost all of our surroundings are the land of the princess's family? If it weren't for us locals, we might think that our village is also a tenant of the princess." Lu Laoda spoke again. Although his face was full of wounds, he couldn't help but feel a bit proud when it came to falsely claiming to be a tenant of the lord's family. It was his sudden inspiration that allowed them to easily escape, otherwise one leg would not be able to be saved. "Who exactly is the princess?" Li Xiu asked again, feeling somewhat helpless. Lu, the boss, only focused on being proud, but did not answer his previous question. Upon hearing Li Xiu's words, Lu and others were all stunned for a moment, then exchanged glances before speaking up. "Master, why did you forget? The princess is naturally the prestigious third lady, and only her name can scare those people away. San Yangzi." Li Xiu was also taken aback when he heard the name. He felt very familiar, and then showed a sudden expression and shouted, "Nyangzi Jun, you're talking about Princess Pingyang." "That's right. The title of San Yangzi seems to be Princess Pingyang." Lu immediately nodded and said. "They usually refer to Princess Pingyang as San Yangzi, but they rarely mention her title. I'm going, I didn't expect to have such an amazing neighbor." Li Xiu was so shocked that he even cursed. If there were people he admired during the early Tang Dynasty, Princess Pingyang would definitely be one. This seemingly weak woman, despite her father and brother's rebellion, was trapped in enemy territory. With her own strength, she pulled up tens of thousands of troops in just a few months and laid a vast land in the heart of the enemy. When Li Yuan and his son crossed the Yellow River and entered Guangzhou, they found that her daughter had prepared such a great gift for him. It is estimated that Li Yuan also had a kind of falling from the sky at that time. The feeling of a pie. However, compared to the legendary military achievements of Princess Pingyang, what Li Xiu is most interested in is her later experiences, because according to official records, apart from the records of Princess Pingyang during the attack on Chang'an, there are very few records of Princess Pingyang afterwards. It is only said that she once led troops to guard the Nyangzi Pass, and the name Nyangzi Pass was derived from her. She suddenly passed away in the 6th year of the Wuda era. Although there is no record in official history of the age at which the princess passed away, according to the ages of Li Jianqing and Li Shimin, at most Princess Pingyang was only in her 20s at that time. Therefore, many people believe that Princess Pingyang may have died in battle, while others believe that she died of illness. In addition, there are other legends, and there is no conclusive evidence, which has left a huge mystery shrouded in Princess Pingyang. 6 years of Wuda, that's next year. Li Xiu suddenly thought of the deadline for Princess Pingyang's death, and couldn't help but mutter to himself. Then he showed a regretful expression and said, "What a pity. My lord, it's a pity that San Nyangzi is not in Chang'an. Otherwise, we could go to her place to seek justice. San Nyangzi is a righteous person and hates the oppression of the people by the powerful. She will definitely help us uphold justice." At this time, Lu Laoda also felt a bit regretful. At the beginning of the uprising, Princess Pingyang established a strict discipline in the women's army and did not harm the people under her rule. This also made her highly respected among the people. Even after being crowned as a princess, the people were more willing to call her San Nyangzi or Li Nyangzi. Upon hearing these words from Lu Laoda, Li Xiu's heart suddenly moved and he thought of something. He then asked Lu Laoda again, "Uncle Lu, do you know that there is a middle-aged man surnamed Ma by the Yellow Canal who goes fishing by the river every day? What does that person have to do with the princess?" "Master, what you're talking about is Ma Yi. That Ma Yi is amazing. Although he appears to be a servant of the princess, he is actually a great general in the court, and even His Majesty praises him. However, his temper is a bit strange, and it's difficult for ordinary people to talk to him." Lu Laoda replied almost without thinking about Li Xiu's description. A domestic servant. Surprisingly, he was still a general. Li Xiu couldn't help but feel an urge to dig his ears upon hearing this, suspecting that he had heard it wrong. These two identities were already contradictory to each other. Since he was a general, how could he possibly be a domestic servant? "That's right, I heard that this horse master worked as a domestic servant with the princess when she was very young. Later, when the princess rose up in arms, the horse master also made a lot of contributions and was appointed as a general by the court. The princess also helped him get rid of his status, but he still regarded himself as a domestic servant in the princess's mansion and usually lived there to take care of the princess. That's why I said he had a strange temper." When Lu finally spoke, his voice became low, as if afraid others would hear him. "A general who claims to be a domestic slave. Interesting." Li Xiu suddenly rubbed his chin and showed a thoughtful expression. After a while, he said to Lu and his team again, "Uncle Lu, you stay at home to recuperate for the next 2 days. Don't sell the bean sprouts yet. As for those who hit you, I will make them pay the price they deserve." 10. Chapter 10 Inviting Mr. Ma to have a meal, recommended collection. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After settling down with Mr. Lu and the others, the first thing Li Xiu did when he returned home was not to find a way to avenge them, but to plunge into the kitchen and prepare for cooking. That's right, it's just cooking. The meat that was sent yesterday hasn't been finished yet, and the pig head and pig feet haven't been processed. He had all kinds of seasonings bought by Mr. Lu before, so it's almost cooked. The pig head is the hardest to deal with, so Li Xiu was the first to take it over. The whole pig head had already been cleaned. He used a large knife to split the pig head in half, and then scalded it with boiling water before putting it into the pot to cook. When it was about 80% cooked, he took it out and soaked it in cold well water for later use. Originally, it was best to make pork head into braised pork head. At least Li Xiu liked this dish very much. However, it was too complicated and took too long to cook. Although Li Xiu liked to eat it, he only knew the general recipe. He didn't have the confidence to make it all at once, so he changed it to another dish, which was garlic minced pork head meat. It was spicy, delicious, and not greasy to eat. The key to making minced garlic pork head is to soak it in cold water after cooking, and change the water several times to make the meat white and hard. Cut it thin like paper with a knife, so that it is delicious when mixed with minced garlic. While soaking the pork head, Li Xiu cut the pig feet into several pieces, blanched them with water, and added various seasonings to stew. This time, he made braised pig feet. After boiling over high heat, he turned it to low heat and cooked for more than an hour until the soup was thick, shiny, and had a slightly gelatinous texture, which was considered successful. In addition, there was still a large piece of meat left in the dumplings yesterday. The fat and thin meat were mixed to make braised pork belly. After the 3 meat dishes were made, Li Xiu fried a green bean sprout with great enthusiasm. Finally, he finished all the 4 dishes of 3 meat dishes and 1 vegetable dish. Then he took out the food box and put the 4 dishes in separately. He looked outside. It was just around noon, so he smiled and carried the food box out of the yard. The beginning of winter has passed, and today's weather is not very good. There is a thick layer of dark clouds above my head, which seems to be wanting to snow. The river water in the Yellow Canal is very clear, but a thin layer of ice has formed on the riverbank. It seems that the entire river surface will be frozen before long. It seems that the winter of the Tang Dynasty came earlier than later generations. Still under the withered willow tree, the middle-aged man known as Ma Yi by Mr. Liu and his companion sat on the bamboo couch holding a straight fishing rod, waiting for the fish to take the bait. Suddenly, Li Xiu had a misconception that he was not like a small fish in a river, seemingly free, but in fact, he could not even control his own fate. Thinking of the above, Li Xiu suddenly sighed. It seemed that his previous thoughts were too simplistic, but now is not the time to think about them. He walked up to the horse's side and didn't disturb the other person's fishing. He just stood there quietly, with a very respectful expression. After all, he had to ask for help from others, so he naturally had to show a pleading attitude. He didn't think he had any domineering aura. A shock can make people cry and shout to come up and help out voluntarily. Regarding Li Xiu's arrival, Ma Yi didn't even glance at him. It seemed that he not only had a strange temper, but also was a cautious person. He still held a grudge against the last incident, which made Li Xiu couldn't help but smile bitterly. It seemed that achieving his goals was not an easy task, and he could only try his best. The next thing was up to fate. Time passed by little, and Li Xiu stood for half an hour. Finally, he saw that it was noon when Ma Yi tilted his eyes and glanced at him, saying, "Kid, standing next to me for half a day without saying anything. What's the point?" Hee, last time the younger generation offended me a lot, I have been feeling very ashamed these days, so I prepared a few small dishes to apologize to Uncle Ma. This Ma Yi and Li Jing are considered comrades in arms, and they are younger than Li Jing. Therefore, Li Xiu naturally referred to each other as Uncle Ma, and he did not mention anything about seeking help, because seeking help is also a skill that needs to be done step by step, otherwise it may be too hasty to achieve. Apology. At this moment, Ma Yi looked at Li Xiu with great interest. His sharp gaze seemed to be able to penetrate people's hearts, and then suddenly smiled, "Are you compensating for this crime a bit late? It took you half a month to come and apologize. This is a bit unreasonable. Do you have anything to ask me for? Damn it, a person who can become a general from a domestic slave is not an easy person to fool." Li Xiu was also surprised to hear this, but on the surface, he remained calm. Instead, he let out a long sigh and showed a aggrieved expression, saying, "Uncle Ma, we can also be considered neighbors. You know the situation in the village this year. To be honest, I came fishing that day because my family couldn't even find a grain of food. The tenants in the Li family also eat pig food every day, and the children are hungry and compete with wild dogs for food. Therefore, the younger generation hasn't done anything else for more than half a month. They start early and work late every day to find ways to improve the lives of the tenants. It's not easy for them to get up a bit. Say, I have some stored grain and copper coins at home, so I have prepared a few small dishes to apologize to Uncle Ma." Li Xiu spoke with sincerity on his face, as what he said was originally the truth and only concealed some details. Ma Yi also kept an eye on the expression on Li Xiu's face, but naturally found nothing. However, he still said with some disbelief, "What can you do in over half a month? You shamelessly improve the lives of tenants. Although you only have 5 tenants, you also have dozens of mouths. It's not that I underestimated you. It's already a blessing from heaven that your tenants didn't starve to death this winter." Upon hearing Ma Ye's words, Li Xiu was not angry, not even able to defend himself. He simply opened the food box and took out the dishes inside. The food box was divided into several layers, with each layer having a plate of dishes. The top layer was made of minced pork head with garlic. However, Ma Yi couldn't help but laugh and say, "You're not very sincere in compensating me. You even invited me to eat pork head, why didn't you order good meat?" Li Xiu noticed that this person surnamed Ma not only had a strange temper and a small heart, but also had a very cheap mouth. However, he asked for help from others, so he decided to ignore it and continue to take out his second dish. This time, it was braised pig feet. Although the red and tempting appearance was, Ma Yi still saw it at first glance. He smiled again and said, "Pig head and pig feet, the next dish won't be pig tail or pig offal, right?" Hearing this, Li Xiuzhen wanted to take out yesterday's pig intestines and put them in each other's mouth, and they still hadn't been washed. But if he couldn't bear it a little, he would make big plans. So he decided to bear it a little longer and continue to take out the third plate of braised pork belly. This finally made Ma Yi change a little and said to himself, "This is a bit sincere, but the meat smells delicious, but I don't know how it tastes." Finally, Li Xiu took out the stir-fried bean sprouts, and Ma Yi finally brightened his eyes and said, "Well done, bean sprouts are very popular in Chang'an City, and it's difficult to buy them usually. Today, the steward in the mansion didn't buy them. I didn't expect you to bring a plate." Ma Yi didn't speak politely to Li Xiu. He picked up his chopsticks and took a few bites of bean sprouts. As soon as the bean sprouts entered his mouth, he immediately praised them loudly, even saying, "Delicious." The bean sprouts themselves were tender and crispy, and stir-fried was the only way to taste delicious. However, chefs in the Tang Dynasty had not yet invented stir-fried dishes, and even the chefs in the princess's mansion only cooked and cold mixed the bean sprouts, which naturally did not taste as delicious as Li Xiu did. After a few mouthfuls of bean sprouts, Mr. Ma turned his eyes to the meat dishes beside him. Originally, pork was cheap meat for dignitaries, and generally tasteful dignitaries disdained eating pork. However, Mr. Ma was originally a domestic slave and a military officer, so he didn't pay so much attention to stink. He immediately grabbed a piece of braised pork belly and threw it into his mouth. He felt that the pork was fat but not greasy, soft and sweet, which made him stare again. He didn't expect pork to be so delicious. Next, he tasted braised pork feet and garlic minced pork head, and found that each dish had its own unique characteristics. Although the 4 dishes had different flavors, they had a common feature, which was that they were very delicious. Moreover, the cooking of these 4 dishes was also very novel. At least he had never eaten a similar dish before, which made him feel his appetite was wide open. After eating a few large bites, he suddenly reached out to Li Xiu and said, "Bring it." "What?" Li Xiu was stunned and didn't understand what Ma Yi wanted. He looked at the other person with a natural expression, as if they were looking for something he should have prepared. However, for a moment, the two of them looked at each other with big eyes, and neither of them understood each other's intentions. "Wine." After a while, the horse master finally exclaimed loudly. Since it was an apology and even the dishes were prepared, how could there be no wine? Moreover, the dishes were so delicious, so the wine that matched them must be extraordinary. Li Xiu finally realized when he heard this. It wasn't that he deliberately didn't prepare any alcohol, but rather that he had already made up his mind not to drink anymore, so he had no concept of alcohol in his mind. It was already too late to react, but it was also difficult for him. At the moment, I saw deliberately shaking my head and sighing, wine is a poison that penetrates the intestines. Uncle Ma should drink it less. Moreover, such a delicious dish, I really can't find a good wine to match it, so I didn't prepare it. Damn it. I think you forgot to prepare, or you don't have the money to buy wine. This horse master is too difficult to fool. He guessed the truth at once, but he wasn't very angry either. He turned his head and took out a small wine jar and a wine bowl from his food box, opened the wine seal, poured a bowl of wine, and then placed it in front of Li Xiu. He picked up the wine jar and took a few sips, shouting, "Good wine. Enjoy." Li Xiu felt a bit embarrassed when he was suddenly exposed by the horse master, but his face had long been experienced and he quickly regained his composure. He looked at the bowl of wine in front of him, then lowered his head to smell it, and then showed a look of disgust. The color of the wine in the bowl was like amber, which is the oldest yellow wine in China. The reason why Li Xiu showed a disdainful expression was not because the yellow wine in front of him was not good, but because the yellow wine usually did not exceed 20 degrees, but when he saw the other person's bold actions and words while drinking, it seemed like drinking erguotu at 60 degrees or above. In later generations, Huangjiu was combined with Confucian culture, so it was also known as the wine of literati. Of course, women can also drink it. For example, a man like Ma Yi, who is 8 feet tall, drinking Huangjiu with a bold face always makes people feel a bit comical. Kid, what expression are you looking at? Do you think my wine is not good? Ma Yi not only had a cheap mouth, but also sharp eyes. He immediately saw the disdainful expression on Li Xiu's face and asked the wine jar heavily.